Ambassador Zethara's 4 eyes widened as she watched the human delegation enter the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council. The humans walked with that strange confidence that had always unnerved the other species. Their movements were too smooth, too calculated, like predators pretending to be civilized. The assembly hall stretched for miles, its crystalline walls reaching toward a dome that showed the swirling nebula of the galaxy's core. Representatives from 300 species sat in their designated sections, each area designed for their specific environmental needs. The aquatic Merithians floated in their water-filled chambers, while the silicon-based crystallites pulsed with soft light from their heated platforms. Captain Sarah Chen led the human group, her military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. Behind her walked Dr. Marcus Webb, the human scientist who had been studying galactic warfare patterns for the past decade. The third human was new to most delegates, Commander Elena Vasquez, whose scarred face told stories that made even the warrior species of Krexthul uncomfortable. "The humans request an emergency session," announced Speaker Prime, a towering Veltaran whose voice echoed through translation devices. "They claim urgent matters regarding the ongoing conflict with the Devourers." A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. The Devourers had been consuming worlds at the galaxy's edge for 2 years now. Entire systems vanished, their populations either killed or transformed into mindless drones. The Galactic Navy had lost 40% of its fleet trying to stop them. Zethara leaned forward in her hovering chair. As the representative of the Kith Mori, one of the galaxy's most ancient civilizations, she had seen many wars, but nothing like this. The Devourers fought with tactics that defied understanding, adapting to every strategy the combined fleets could devise. Captain Chen stepped to the speaking platform, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Honored delegates, we come before you today with a proposal that may save our galaxy." "The humans have done enough," interrupted General Corvus of the Mandorian Empire. His 6 arms gestured dismissively. "Your species has contributed 12 ships to our cause, 12, while the rest of us sacrifice entire fleets." A murmur of agreement rose from several sections. The humans were still newcomers to galactic society, having joined only 50 years ago. Their homeworld, Earth, was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so hostile that most species couldn't survive there for more than a few minutes without life support. Dr. Webb spoke next, his calm voice cutting through the noise. "General Corvus raises a valid point. We have contributed relatively few ships, but perhaps we've been approaching this war incorrectly." "What do you mean?" asked President Velnash of the Democratic Worlds Alliance. "The Devourers are efficient," Webb continued. "They consume resources, convert populations, and expand systematically. But they follow patterns. They avoid certain types of resistance." Commander Vasquez stepped forward, and the assembly fell silent. There was something about her presence that commanded attention. When she spoke, her words were measured and cold. "We've analyzed every engagement with the Devourers, every battle, every loss, every small victory. The pattern is clear. They retreat when faced with what they perceive as excessive cost." "Nonsense," scoffed Admiral Threnwick of the Aquatic Federation. "We've thrown everything at them. Quantum torpedoes, plasma storms, dimensional disruptors. Nothing phases them." "That's because you're fighting like civilized beings," Vasquez replied, and something in her tone made several delegates shift uncomfortably. "The Devourers expect civilized warfare. They've adapted to it." Speaker Prime's translation device crackled. "Explain your meaning, human." Captain Chen took over again. "We're requesting permission to implement Protocol 7. The assembly erupted. Delegates began shouting in dozens of languages, their translation devices creating a chaos of overlapping voices. Protocol 7 was a theoretical human military doctrine that had been presented to the Galactic Council during the integration process. It had been immediately classified and locked away. "Absolutely not!" General Corvus stood, his massive frame trembling with rage. "Protocol 7 violates every treaty of civilized warfare we've established over the last millennium." "The Geneva Conventions," Webb said quietly, and the assembled beings fell silent to hear him. "The Hague Protocols, the Velteran Accords on Humane Warfare. Yes, Protocol 7 violates all of them." Zathara felt a chill run through her crystalline body. She had read the classified file on Protocol 7. Every member of the Galactic Council's Security Committee had. It detailed human military capabilities that seemed almost impossible to believe. "You cannot be serious," President Velnash said, her voice barely a whisper. "The casualties would be less than what we're experiencing now," Vasquez interrupted. "The Devourers have consumed 47 worlds. That's over 2 billion sentient beings. How many more will die while we maintain our civilized approach to warfare?" The crystallite representative pulsed a deep red, their equivalent of distress. "The humans speak of abandoning the very principles that separate us from barbarians." "Do they?" Captain Chen asked. "Or are we simply willing to become monsters so that you don't have to?" The silence that followed was deafening. Every delegate understood the implications. The humans were offering to cross lines that the other species couldn't, or wouldn't, cross themselves. Speaker Prime's voice resonated through the hall. "The Council will recess for deliberation. All delegates will reconvene in 6 hours for a formal vote." As the assembly dispersed, Zathara found herself approaching the human delegation. Her species had always prided themselves on their wisdom, accumulated over thousands of years of peaceful evolution. "Captain Chen," she said, her translator converting her crystalline tones into standard galactic. "What you propose, it would change you, change your people." Sarah Chen looked at her with those unsettling human eyes, forward-facing, predatory, designed for a species that had climbed to the top of their world's food chain through violence and cunning. "Ambassador Zathara, my species evolved on a world where everything wanted to kill us. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the microorganisms. We survived because we became very good at killing first." She paused, looking around at the beautiful, peaceful architecture of the assembly hall. "For 50 years, we've tried to become like you. Civilized, peaceful. We've suppressed our nature because we wanted to be worthy of joining this galactic community." "And now?" Zathara asked, though she feared the answer. "Now we're going to remember who we really are." Dr. Webb joined the conversation, his academic manner contrasting sharply with the captain's military bearing. "The other species see our world as a nightmare. They call us Deathworlders as if it's an insult. But every nightmare we survived made us stronger. The Devourers think they're the apex predators of this galaxy," Vasquez added, her scarred face showing no emotion. "They're about to learn what real predators look like." Over the next 6 hours, the debate raged through private channels and diplomatic meetings. The more peaceful species argued that Protocol 7 represented a regression to barbarism. The military powers worried about the precedent it would set. The synthetic intelligences calculated probability matrices that made even their quantum processors overheat. When the assembly reconvened, the tension was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Speaker Prime called for order, and the vast hall fell silent. "The matter before us today will determine the future of our civilization," the speaker began. "We must choose between maintaining our principles and potentially allowing the Devourers to consume our galaxy or authorizing the humans to employ methods that violate every treaty we've established." The vote proceeded by species. The Aquatic Federation voted no, as expected. The Democratic Worlds Alliance split their vote. The warrior species of Krexthul surprised everyone by voting yes, citing their respect for effective combat doctrine. When it came time for the Kith Mori vote, Zethara stood slowly. Her ancient species had been guardians of galactic peace for over 3,000 years. The Kith Mori have watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia, she said. We have seen the price of both action and inaction. In this matter, we abstain from the vote. But we will not stand in the way of those willing to make necessary sacrifices. The final tally was narrow. 151 species in favor, 149 opposed. Protocol 7 was authorized by the slimmest possible margin. Captain Chen stood as the results were announced. The human delegation accepts this responsibility. All species that wish to maintain plausible deniability should withdraw their liaison officers from human vessels immediately. "When do you begin?" asked General Corvus, his voice subdued. "We've already begun," Vasquez replied. The moment this vote passed, every human military unit in the galaxy received their new orders. The assembly fell silent as the implications sank in. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the humans were about to unleash something that the galaxy had never seen. Something that violated every principle of civilized warfare that had been carefully built over thousands of years. As the delegates began to file out, many couldn't shake the feeling that they had just witnessed a turning point in galactic history. The humans had been welcomed into their community as the strange, violent species from the death world at the galaxy's edge. Now they were about to discover what that really meant. Dr. Webb remained behind, updating his research files. The war against the Devourers was about to enter a new phase, one that would be studied by military historians for generations to come, if there were any historians left when it was over. The last message logged in the assembly records that day was a simple communication from the human fleet commander to all galactic Navy units. Recommend you maintain minimum safe distance from all human vessels. What happens next is not for civilized eyes to see. In the depths of space, human ships began powering up weapons systems that had been locked away since their species joined the galactic community. Aboard the UES Retribution, Captain Maria Santos looked at her crew. Men and women who had spent their careers following rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties and protect civilian populations. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced over the ship's communication system, "as of today, we are no longer bound by the constraints of civilized warfare. Command has authorized Protocol 7. All previous rules of engagement are suspended." The silence that followed was broken by her weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Jackson. "Ma'am, are we really going to do this?" Santos looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, the Devourer fleet was continuing its systematic consumption of civilized worlds. "Mr. Jackson, for 50 years we've tried to be something we're not. We've pretended that the killers who conquered Earth could learn to be gentle. Today, we stop pretending." As human fleets across the galaxy received their orders, a change began to spread through their ranks. The careful discipline of civilized military doctrine gave way to something older, something that had been bred into humanity through millions of years of evolution on a world that offered no mercy to the weak. The Devourers had no idea what was coming for them. They had faced the combined might of 300 civilized species and found them wanting. But they had never faced a species that had learned warfare in the crucible of a death world, where the only law was survival and the only morality was victory. The galaxy was about to remember why some worlds were classified as too dangerous for civilized life, and why the species that survived such worlds were not to be underestimated. The first sign that something had changed came from the Outer Rim territories. Admiral Kresh of the Devourer fleet had just finished consuming the mineral-rich world of Vexthara when his scouts reported an anomaly in the Kepler 442 system. "Speak," Kresh commanded, his voice echoing through the biomechanical command center of his flagship. Around him, The merged consciousness of his fleet pulsed with shared thought patterns. Human vessels detected, Admiral, but they are not following established patterns. Kresh's interest peaked. The humans had been an annoyance, nothing more. Their small ships occasionally harassed his outer scouts, but they followed the same predictable tactics as all civilized species. They engaged at long range, avoided civilian targets, and retreated when faced with superior numbers. "Show me," he ordered. The holographic display materialized, showing the Kepler 442 system in real time. 3 Devourer harvest ships were working methodically through the asteroid mining colonies, converting the population and extracting resources. It was routine work, the kind of operation his fleet performed dozens of times each cycle. But the approaching human fleet was not behaving routinely. "They are not broadcasting surrender demands," the scout reported, confusion evident in its merged voice. "They are not attempting to evacuate civilians. They are simply approaching." Kresh studied the tactical display. 12 human vessels, moving in a formation he didn't recognize. Their energy signatures were different too. Weapons that had been powered down for decades were now coming online. "Curious," he mused. "Perhaps they have finally developed courage." The first human ship to engage was the UES Vengeance, a heavy cruiser that had seen action in the early days of the war. Its captain, Elena Vasquez, had been reassigned from diplomatic duties just 48 hours earlier. What happened next defied every principle of civilized warfare that the galaxy had established. Instead of engaging the military vessels, the Vengeance opened fire directly on a Devourer harvest ship. But these weren't the clean, precise shots typical of galactic naval combat. The humans unleashed everything they had: plasma cannons, railguns, missile swarms, and weapons that most species had banned centuries ago. The harvest ship, caught completely off guard, was torn apart in seconds. The Devourer crew barely had time to register the attack before their biomechanical systems were reduced to floating debris. But that was just the beginning. "Admiral," the scout's voice carried a note of panic that Kresh had never heard from his perfectly controlled forces. "They are not stopping." The human fleet split into smaller groups, each targeting different parts of the Devourer operation. They moved with a coordination that suggested months of planning, hitting weak points that shouldn't have been known to any outside force. Kresh activated the fleet-wide communication network. "All vessels, standard defensive formation. Prepare to demonstrate the futility of their gesture." But as the Devourer fleet moved to respond, they discovered that the humans had anticipated their tactics. Every standard maneuver was countered before it could be executed. Every defensive position was flanked by ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. "How are they predicting our movements?" demanded Commander Vash, whose destroyer squadron had just been outmaneuvered by a single human frigate. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Marcus Webb's voice crackled over an open communication channel, transmitted in perfect Devourer bio-speech. "Because we've been studying you for 2 years, Admiral Kresh. Every battle, every tactic, every biological response pattern. We know how you think because we've watched you think." Kresh felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. "Impossible. Our bioneural networks are encrypted beyond any civilized species' ability to decode." "Who said we were civilized?" came the response, followed by a sound that chilled the Admiral to his biomechanical core: human laughter. The UES Retribution, Captain Santos's flagship, had been holding position at the edge of the system. Now it began to move, and with it came a revelation that would haunt the Devourer collective consciousness for years to come. The ship was surrounded by what appeared to be debris, twisted metal, organic matter, and unidentifiable technology. As it approached the main Devourer formation, the truth became clear. The debris was composed of Devourer bioships harvested from previous encounters and rebuilt into something new. "Abomination!" Kresh screamed, his perfectly controlled demeanor finally cracking. You desecrate the dead! Captain Santos's voice came through the communication system, cold and matter-of-fact. Admiral, you've been converting our people into drones for 2 years. Did you really think we wouldn't learn to return the favor? The retrofitted bioships began to separate from the retribution, moving with jerky, unnatural motions, but they were functional, and worse yet, they retained enough of their original programming to confuse the Devourer identification systems. Our own ships are targeting us, reported Commander Vash. The biorecognition protocols are failing. What followed was chaos. The carefully orchestrated Devourer formation dissolved as ships fired on targets they couldn't properly identify. The humans pressed their advantage, using captured biotechnology to turn the Devourer's own coordination against them. But the real horror was yet to come. The UES Vengeance, having destroyed the first Harvest ship, began to approach the second. Commander Vasquez opened a direct channel to the Devourer crew. This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Human Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to abandon ship. The Devourer captain, Tokvara, responded with typical arrogance. We do not abandon ships. Human. We do not feel fear as you primitive... 20 seconds, Vasquez interrupted. You cannot threaten us with destruction. Our biohull regenerates. Our crew can survive in vacuum. Your weapons are insufficient to... 10 seconds. Final warning. Tokvara was about to respond when his sensor officer reported something impossible. The human ship was charging weapons that weren't supposed to exist, energy signatures that matched no known technology in the galactic database. 5 seconds. What are those weapons? Tokvara demanded. 4. The Devourer captain finally felt something his species had nearly evolved beyond: fear. 3. We surrender! We surrender! Tokvara screamed. 2. Please! We will withdraw! We will never return to this system! 1. The weapon that fired from the UES Vengeance was unlike anything in the galactic arsenal. It wasn't designed to destroy. It was designed to cause suffering. The biomechanical hull of the Devourer ship began to writhe and convulse as nanoscale machines infected its living systems. What is this? Tokvara screamed as his ship's bio-neural network began to experience something no Devourer had felt in millennia. Agony. It's called a pain amplifier, Vasquez replied calmly. We developed it specifically for your species. Your bioships feel pain, don't they? They just suppress it through neural conditioning. Our weapon removes that suppression. The Devourer ship thrashed in space like a wounded animal as its living hull experienced every bit of damage it had ever sustained without the mercy of neural dampening. The crew inside was driven mad by the psychic feedback. Stop it! Admiral Kresh commanded over the fleet network. This is not warfare. This is torture. Yes, came Vasquez's simple reply. It is. The demonstration had its intended effect. The remaining Devourer Harvest ship immediately began broadcasting surrender signals, its crew desperate to avoid the fate of their companions. But the humans weren't finished. Captain Santos opened a fleet-wide channel, broadcasting on all frequencies so that every ship in the system could hear. Attention all Devourer forces. You have 2 options. You can surrender unconditionally and be processed according to our new protocols, or you can continue fighting and discover what other gifts we've prepared for you. New protocols? Admiral Kresh asked, though he dreaded the answer. Dr. Webb's voice joined the conversation. Oh yes, Admiral. We've been studying your biology very carefully. Did you know that your biomechanical nervous system is vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies? Frequencies that cause hallucinations, paranoia, and eventually complete mental breakdown? As if to demonstrate, several human ships began broadcasting on those exact frequencies. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and devastating. Crews began reporting false sensor readings, seeing enemy ships where none existed, firing on their own vessels in panic. Or perhaps you'd prefer our biological warfare options, Webb continued conversationally. We've developed several interesting viruses specifically tailored to your merged biology. They cause the biomechanical implants to reject the organic components, essentially tearing your crews apart from the inside. The calm, academic tone made the words even more horrifying. This wasn't the passionate fury of a warrior species. This was cold, calculated sadism applied with scientific precision. Commander Vash's destroyer was the first to break formation entirely, its crew driven to madness by the electromagnetic assault. It began firing wildly in all directions, hitting both human and devourer vessels indiscriminately. "Stop!" Admiral Kresh pleaded. "We surrender! The entire fleet surrenders!" Captain Santos considered this for a moment. "Surrender accepted, Admiral. Please stand by for processing instructions." "Processing?" Kresh asked weakly. "Oh, yes," Webb replied cheerfully. "We can't just let you leave. You've consumed too many worlds, killed too many innocent people. But we're not going to simply execute you either. That would be wasteful." The truth of what processing meant became clear when the first transport ships arrived. They were human vessels, but modified with devourer biotechnology. Inside were creatures that had once been devourer crews from previous engagements. "Meet your former comrades," Vasquez announced. "We've made some improvements to their design. They're much more cooperative now." The processed devourers moved with mechanical precision, but their biomechanical eyes still held traces of awareness. They could see, they could understand, but they could no longer control their actions. They had become living tools, extensions of human will. Admiral Kresh felt his consciousness fracturing as he realized what awaited him. The humans hadn't just learned to fight like devourers, they had learned to be worse. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Civilized species they can't." "Admiral," Captain Santos said gently, "I think you misunderstood something fundamental about humans. We were never civilized. We just learned to pretend." As the human processing ships began their work, word of what had happened in the Kepler 442 system spread through devourer communication networks. For the first time in their species' history, devourer fleets began to retreat not from superior firepower, but from pure, primal terror. The humans had shown them something worse than death. They had shown them what it meant to be prey. 6 months after the Kepler 442 incident, Ambassador Zethara stood in her private chamber aboard the diplomatic station, orbiting Centauri Prime. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see human ships patrolling the system's perimeter. Their hulls were no longer the clean, standardized designs typical of galactic Navy vessels. Instead, they bore the twisted, organic modifications that had become the signature of human warfare. The war was over. The devourers had been eliminated as a threat. But the victory had come at a cost that none of the galactic civilizations had fully comprehended when they authorized Protocol 7. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. Captain Sarah Chen materialized as a hologram, but Zethara barely recognized her. The composed diplomat who had addressed the Galactic Assembly was gone, replaced by something harder, more predatory. "Ambassador," Chen said, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. "The Human Confederation requests a formal audience with the Galactic Council." "Of course, Captain. We owe your species a tremendous debt. The galaxy is safe because of your sacrifices." Chen's smile was cold. "Sacrifices? Yes, we made those. And now it's time to discuss compensation." Something in the human's tone made Zethara's crystalline structure vibrate with unease. "Compensation, Captain? The Council is prepared to offer substantial rewards. Territory, trade agreements, advanced technology transfers." "That won't be necessary," Chen interrupted. "We've taken what we need." Before Zethara could ask what that meant, her communication array lit up with emergency signals from across the galaxy. Reports were flooding in from dozens of systems, all carrying the same impossible message. Human fleets were occupying strategic positions throughout civilized space. "This must be some mistake," Zethara said, but even as she spoke, she could see human ships moving into formation around the diplomatic station itself. "No mistake," Chen replied. "Operation Manifest Destiny is proceeding exactly as planned." The hologram flickered as additional figures joined the transmission. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared, his academic demeanor replaced by something calculating and ruthless. Commander Elena Vasquez stood behind them, her scarred face showing no emotion as she monitored tactical displays. "You see, Ambassador," Webb said conversationally, "the war with the Devourers taught us something important about galactic politics. Civilized species are remarkably easy to control once you understand their psychology." "Control?" Zethara's voice rose to frequencies that strained her translator. "What are you talking about?" Vasquez stepped forward, her movement causing the hologram to focus on her. "For 50 years, we played by your rules. We pretended to be civilized. We submitted to your laws, accepted your limitations, allowed ourselves to be treated as junior partners in a galaxy our ancestors could have conquered centuries ago. But that changes now," Chen continued seamlessly. "The galaxy has seen what humans are capable of when we stop holding back. The question is, do you want us as partners or as masters?" Zethara felt her ancient wisdom failing her. "This is madness. The other species will never accept human dominance. The Mandorians alone have fleets that could—" "The Mandorians are currently dealing with internal uprisings," Webb interrupted, consulting a datapad. "Remarkably, all 6 of their primary military commanders have experienced simultaneous system failures in their biomechanical implants. Our process devourers proved quite useful in infiltrating their medical facilities." The casual way he delivered this information made Zethara's crystalline structure dim with horror. "You've been planning this since the vote." "Since before the vote," Vasquez corrected. "Did you really think we would unleash our true capabilities without considering the aftermath? Every weapon we used against the Devourers can be used against civilized species. Every biological warfare agent we developed, every psychological manipulation technique we perfected, all of it works just as well on the galactic community." Chen gestured and the hologram expanded to show a galactic map. Red markers indicated human fleet positions, which now formed a network that could isolate or destroy any major civilization within days. "The beautiful thing about civilized species," Chen continued, "is that you've forgotten how to fight total war. You have rules, limitations, moral boundaries. We don't. Not anymore." "What do you want?" Zethara asked, though she feared the answer. "What we've always wanted," Webb replied. "Respect. Recognition. The acknowledgement that humans deserve a place at the head of galactic civilization. But you're threatening war to get it." Vasquez laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Ambassador, there is no threat of war. War implies 2 sides capable of fighting. What we're offering is a choice between voluntary cooperation and involuntary subjugation." As if to emphasize the point, the lights in Zethara's chamber dimmed as human ships outside began charging their weapons. The organic modifications to their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to writhe in the darkness. "The Galactic Council will resist," Zethara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Will they?" Chen asked. "Let's see. Communications to and from this station are now under human control. The defense platforms have been infiltrated by our processed assets. The council chambers themselves are currently being inspected by human technical teams." Webb pulled up another display showing the interior of the Grand Assembly Hall. Human soldiers in modified biomechanical armor were systematically installing devices throughout the vast chamber. "Insurance policies, Webb explained. In case the delegates decide to be uncooperative, a simple electromagnetic pulse will disable the life support systems for 70% of the represented species. Nothing fatal, of course. We're not barbarians. Aren't you? Zethara asked quietly. The three humans exchanged glances, and for a moment, their facade of civilized discourse slipped. In their eyes, Zethara saw something that chilled her to her core, the predatory intelligence of a species that had climbed to the top of a Deathworld's food chain through violence and cunning. Ambassador, Chen said softly, we tried to be like you. For 50 years we suppressed our nature, followed your rules, pretended that cooperation was possible between apex predators and prey species, but you taught us something important. We did? You showed us that civilized species will always see us as dangerous outsiders. The vote to authorize Protocol 7 wasn't about trusting us. It was about being too afraid to fight the Devourers yourselves. You used us as attack dogs and expected us to go back to being pets when the job was done. Vasquez nodded agreement. Did you know that 67% of the Council's classified communications refer to humans as useful barbarians? 83% of military planning documents recommend keeping human forces isolated from civilized units to prevent cultural contamination. We were never going to be accepted as equals, Webb added, so we decided to stop trying. The holographic display changed again, showing population centers across the galaxy. Human transport ships were visible in orbit around dozens of worlds, their biomechanical modifications making them look like alien growths against the clean lines of civilized architecture. What are those ships doing? Zethara asked. Cultural exchange programs, Chen replied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're sharing some of our technological advances with interested populations. The pain amplifiers we used on the Devourers work just as well for behavior modification in other species. You're going to torture entire populations into compliance. Only if they resist, Vasquez said matter-of-factly. Most species are remarkably cooperative once they understand the alternatives. The Aquatic Federation, for example, agreed to our terms after a brief demonstration in their capital system. Webb consulted his data pad. Admiral Threnwick was particularly persuasive in convincing his people to accept human oversight. His experiences with our biological warfare agents gave him valuable insights into the futility of resistance. Zethara realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just threatening conquest. They were systematically eliminating any possibility of organized resistance. Every major military leader who might oppose them was being neutralized through violence, corruption, or psychological warfare. The Kith Mori will never submit, she said, invoking her own species' proud history. Won't they? Chen asked. Your homeworld's defense grid has been offline for 3 hours. Technical difficulties, according to your military command. They have no idea that their quantum encryption was cracked by our processed Devourer assets months ago. The casual revelation that even the galaxy's most advanced civilization had been compromised made Zethara's ancient confidence crumble. If the humans could neutralize the Kith Mori, no species was safe. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Why reveal your plans if you could simply execute them? Because we're not monsters, Webb said, and for the first time, Zethara heard a note of genuine regret in his voice. We'd prefer cooperation to conquest. The galaxy will be more stable if the transition appears voluntary. Chen nodded. Your species has guided galactic civilization for thousands of years. Your endorsement of human leadership would carry enormous weight with the other delegates. You want me to legitimize your coup. We want you to recognize reality, Vasquez corrected. Human dominance of this galaxy is inevitable. The only question is whether the transition happens peacefully or violently. Zethara was silent for a long moment, processing the implications of what she'd learned. The humans had planned and executed a campaign of conquest so sophisticated that most of the galaxy didn't even realize it was happening. They had used the war against the Devourers as cover to position themselves for total domination. "What guarantees do we have?" she asked finally. "How do we know you won't simply eliminate the other species once your control is complete?" "You don't," Chen admitted, "but consider the alternative. If the galactic community resists, the war that follows will make our campaign against the Devourers look like a minor skirmish. We've had 6 months to perfect our methods of biological warfare, psychological manipulation, and technological infiltration. How many billions will die in a futile resistance?" "On the other hand," Webb added, "cooperation offers significant benefits. Human technology will revolutionize galactic civilization. Our understanding of warfare will protect against future threats. Our administrative efficiency will eliminate the corruption and waste that plagued the old council system." Vasquez's scarred face showed the first hint of emotion as she spoke. "We don't want to rule through fear forever, Ambassador, but we learned something important from the death world that shaped us. Sometimes you have to be the monster to protect what matters." The transmission ended, leaving Zethara alone with the weight of an impossible decision. Outside her window, human ships continued their patrol, their biomechanical modifications glowing softly in the starlight. Each vessel represented technological capabilities that dwarfed anything in the galaxy, wielded by a species that had learned to see conquest as a form of protection. Hours later, when the Galactic Council reconvened for an emergency session, the delegates found the assembly hall subtly transformed. Human technical advisors stood at strategic positions throughout the chamber. The environmental controls had been modified to accommodate human preferences, making many species uncomfortable in their own meeting space. Speaker Prime called for order, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Everyone could see the human soldiers, could feel the change in the balance of power that had shifted overnight. When Captain Chen took the speaking platform, her words carried the weight of inevitability. "Honored delegates, humanity formally requests recognition as the senior partner in a reformed galactic confederation. We believe this new arrangement will bring unprecedented peace and prosperity to civilized space." The vote that followed was unanimous, not because the delegates agreed, but because they understood that disagreement was no longer an option. The humans had shown them a choice between voluntary submission and involuntary extinction. As Zethara cast her vote, she reflected on the irony of the situation. The galaxy had invited the humans to become civilized, and they had learned the lesson too well. They understood that civilization was just a thin veneer over the basic truth of existence. The strong ruled the weak, and everything else was just elaborate theater. The Galactic Confederation would survive, but it would never be the same. The humans had saved civilization from the Devourers, only to remake it in their own image. And perhaps, Zethara thought with crystalline sadness, that had been their plan all along. The day the Deathworlders turned savage had ended, but its consequences would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had finally claimed its rightful place among the stars, not as junior partners begging for acceptance, but as the apex predators they had always been.